Hello? Welcome. This is Fostering a Successful Tableau Deployment. My name is Anton. I've done that before. My name is not Aaron. My name is Anton. Anton. This is my coworker, Aaron. And these are our dogs. There we go. We got it working. These are our dogs, Oscar and Olive. And they help to contribute to Seattle's statistic of having more dogs than children. So Aaron and I, we both work on Tableau's analytics team. And our team's self-service approach allows our team of just 7 people to help over 3,000 people in our community to be successful in their use of Tableau. And we've been pretty fortunate at our job where we've had a lot of opportunity to build this community. So we are here to tell you about what that took and how you can do it yourself. So, I'd like all of you to take a moment, slow down, and think about a community that you're a part of. Maybe it's TC Conference. I feel that's a community. Maybe it's a virtual community that you're a member of. Could be your neighborhood. Now, raise your hand if this community has benefited your life in any way, if it's made things easier. Honestly, right? Everybody's hand should shoot up. That's what community is all about. And we're here to talk about that. Now, you may not be a part of this community that I'll tell you about. In the 18th and 19th centuries, rural Americans required barns to survive and prosper. They would use it for livestock. They would use it to store their feed. But as important as this barn was for their life, they usually couldn't build it on their own. And they couldn't build it with just their small family. So out of this necessity, a tradition was born, barn raising. It became pretty popular in America and Europe, where community members would come together and volunteer their time to help just one member out to put up a barn for them, knowing full well that when they needed help, when they needed a barn of their own, their community would be there to help them. Now take a look at this picture. It's not just a small team of craftsmen. It's everyone in the community. It's men, women, and children, all with different skills and different things they can contribute. And from this, the lesson I want you to take, what you should take away from this whole presentation, is that together as a community, skilled craftsmen and unskilled help, we can do a whole lot more than any one small team of experts could do. Now, this community that we're talking about, the one you've probably thought about if you actually listen to me, they all grew organically, right? They sprouted up out of necessity, out of passions, out of interests. But what if in this photo, there wasn't a community? What if it was just this group of people? How would you go about building that community? What would it take? Well, we're here to talk about a different community, a community at your work. And those communities, unfortunately, don't just sprout up organically. They take work, right? They take a lot of forethought and nurturing, and maybe a few team building exercises, unfortunately. And at Tableau, we know a thing or two about that, not the team building exercises. But we do know a thing or two about building community. We've been doing it for many years now. And in our community, we know that we are able to do a whole lot more together with our 3,200 people than we could with just a small team of analysts. So I'm not here to say that we're done building our barn or that it's perfect. That's not what I'm saying at all. But we have been building our community for a long time, and we feel like we are on the right path to something that is successful. And we have had a lot of struggles and successes. We want to take those lessons and give them to you so that you can build your community much stronger than it already is. And that's what I'd like to invite Aaron to come up here and talk to you about, is what it takes to build a Tableau community.
Thanks, Anton. Okay, so beyond the high-level talk of what a community does for us, what are the tactical pieces? What are the bricks and mortar of a great Tableau community? How do you get people to adopt Tableau? How do you get them to ask and answer questions? and keep on doing that follow-on analysis that has so much value? Well, we've synthesized all of the elements of our great Tableau community, and we're really excited to bring it to you today. So built-in community takes intentions, and it takes resources, like Anton said, but it doesn't have to be overly onerous. So in sharing these foundations for Tableau's community, however much you want to invest in any single foundation is up to you. It's up to your organization, your resources, and your preferences. But we really think that you should invest in all of them. That's why we distilled them and came up with a list for you. So what do you need in a great Tableau community? On day one, you need formalized definitions and knowledge, a place for these to live so that everybody knows what we're talking about when we're talking about a certain data source or a particular metric. You need engagement so that your users feel supported, so that you are reaching new users within your organization whose voices you haven't heard. You need to help make working with the data more fun than I think it already is. Okay, third, you need a place to get questions answered. People need to feel supported through their data journey. You need to make sure that people don't ever stop asking those valuable business questions. Fourth, you need a place to help people find content. You need to save them time and frustration. So when your Tableau server gets to be big enough, people are going to be wading through content, which is a great problem, but it can be a problem. So you need to help them find what's relevant to them. So as we go through this, I want you to think about what it is in your organization, in your community that you may be lacking, that you can take back with you to make your community stronger and more vibrant and more supportive. Okay. Welcome to the community. This is our internal community. I talked about it at my last talk a little bit. It looks just like our external community. How many of you folks are familiar with our external community, our community? Yes, awesome. It's a great resource if you're learning Tableau. This is where people ask and answer all of these questions. There's no judgment. It's fabulous. This is where our formalized definitions and knowledge live at Tableau. So in our internal community on day one, anybody can come in here when they get, I'm getting feedback. Are you guys? Yeah, okay. So on day one, we get a license to Tableau Desktop at Tableau, and we get access to all of the data. It sounds crazy, right? This is how we make sense of it. This is our internal community. So on day one, whether you're interested in bug tracking, which people in our development organization would be interested in, or you're interested in sales metrics or marketing metrics, you can go to all of our data sources. All of our curated data sources are outlined here. We have schemas for those who want to get kind of down and dirty with the data, understand the join structure, and we have workbooks that are already connected to these data sources for people who don't. So an example of formalized knowledge that could live on this site would be a metric of customer lifetime value. Everybody kind of defines that a little bit differently. And so here is where you spell it out for everybody in your organization. An example of another thing this could contain that's useful for your community is how do we connect to a data source on Tableau server? How do we connect to our Salesforce instance? These are things that you all know because you've done a million times, but somebody coming in on day one has no idea, and so you have to spell it out for them. So the beauty of this community is that as people ask and answer questions, it gets built up as a resource. And this is in opposition to when you become a Tableau expert in your organization, or people think you're an expert, you may not even be an expert, people are going to start banging down your door with questions. You answer these questions in the hallway or in the elevator or an email, and it happens in a vacuum. None of this knowledge is preserved for your organization. If this happens on the community, it exists for years down the road as people continue to ask that question, and they will. So we have this on our Jive platform, which is what we use for our external community. You may not have access to that. There are other places that you can do this. You can do this on internal forums, on wikis, SharePoint sites, data sources and data dictionaries all contain these metrics and these sort of formalized definitions. A couple of tips about how you do this, whatever platform you choose. Make sure you use a platform that people have already adopted at your company. Make it easy on yourself. And make sure that your platform is flexible enough to change as the data definitions change and as the data changes. Okay, that's formalized definitions and knowledge. Now, not everybody is going to naturally engage with the data. Early adopters, they're going to adopt early. But not everybody wants to participate in a conversation around data and around technology. And that's where engagement comes in. That's our next fundamental. So this is Louis. He just won our internal VizWiz competition. Anybody here planning on going to see Iron Viz? Yes. I highly recommend it. Iron Viz is at conference. We call it our visual cage match. And it's really entertaining, and it's excellent. It shows off the best of the best with Tableau. So Louis here is absolutely thrilled, chuffed, as he would say, because he's English, because he just won our internal VizWiz competition. And this is a competition where we give everybody access to the same data set, and we award the person who tells the best story with the data. So Louis won this with a viz about the Bechdel test. I was at the Data and Women meetup earlier, and somebody made reference to the Bechdel test. So here it is again. It's a metric of female participation in films. Louis won this because he did this really cool vertical scrolling viz. I don't know if you guys have seen this, but it goes down the page. Each viz sort of builds on the next viz, and you get a different slice, a different side of the story as you go down until you kind of build to your conclusion. It's a really great storytelling mechanism. It's really creative. As you go down the page, we have films in peach that pass the Bechdel test. We have films in blue that fail the Bechdel test. And it goes on and on. Louis ultimately makes the conclusion that films that pass the Bechdel test have a higher ROI. So when we think about Louis participating in this, he's a data rock star. He knows what he's doing with the data. He knows how to tell a story with the data. He's showcasing to our organization how to tell a story, visual best practice. This is kind of how you do it. And that's really useful. It's useful to an organization that's new with data visualization and with data storytelling, because you kind of want to point to everybody else in your company and go, this is how you do it, right? And that's one engagement program. But there are other ways that you can engage other people within your community whose voices you haven't heard from. These are less technical users. These are people who might need a little bit of a nudge to get working with the data. An example of this is a lower stakes engagement program. We have a Tableau art walk at Tableau. I'll explain this for you. How many of you have ever been building something in Tableau? You change a measure from continuous to discrete, and Tableau gives you like the craziest visualization you've ever seen. It's like something a spirograph made. It's crazy. It makes no sense, and it's hilarious, and you want to show it off, right? That's where we do that at Tableau. So it doesn't take as much technical expertise to create something like this. And the point of this is to get people using the data and to have it be fun to use the data. We want it to be lower stakes than a typical competition style engagement program, because you're just going to get different people. You're going to hear different voices. Here's an example of something that came from a Tableau art walk. Now, when Stephanie created this, obviously it wasn't accidental. She collected data for a year on what she was wearing. So we get kind of the gist over the seasons of the color of what she's wearing and how much she's wearing it. It's really cool. But the point of this is not necessarily to like inform us or to tell a story with the data. I can't go in here and see how many times she wore the data sweatshirt, for example. The point of this is that it's cool and that it's fun and that it's pretty. So as you're planning your engagement programs for your community, you need to think about whose voice you're not hearing. You need to plan engagement programs for them as well as for your Tableau experts who you've probably already heard from. Okay, so we've engaged our users. We've given them a place for formalized definitions and knowledge to live so that they know what they're doing on day one. How do you get their questions answered? This is Tableau Doctor. And this is our next fundamental. You need to provide a place for people to get their questions answered. How many of you folks have a Tableau Doctor appointment? at conference. Okay, more than last time. Okay, I spoke right before this, and like 2 people raised their hands, and I was like, please make use of this resource. It's fabulous. We've known for years how successful Tableau Doctor is at helping our customers get unstuck with their data. So we started our own internal Tableau Doctor, and this is it. We had a box full of cookies one day, we had a booked conference room, and we have a handful of people who are willing to be doctors. So here on the left, we've got a ton of participation, a ton of people. Here on the right, we have one person who's donating an hour of his week to being a doctor at Tableau Doctor. So Tableau Doctor is not just for us at Tableau because we have tons of resources and staff to do this. You can take it back to your organization with a minimum of resources. So do it at the same time and the same place every week. It's a standing appointment. And if I forget to send out the Tableau Doctor email, which is the super sophisticated way that I market Tableau Doctor, people are still going to come because we've been doing this for 2 years. So people are still going to come, even if I don't send the email. In fact, I need to send the email this week because people will show up. And there's huge value in that. Like it becomes a thing that people know about. You get more participation. You get regulars. Remote employees. We have a ton of remote employees. So we have WebEx options for our doctor visits. We want to make sure that everybody feels supported, even if you're a sales rep in Colombia. We serve appointments and we serve walk-ins. And so people like myself who like to make an appointment and have a schedule, I'm good. And then there are other people who see that Tableau Doctor is going on, and they just come on in because they maybe had a viz that they wanted help on, or they want to understand a data source. I'm going to go ahead and explain. I said Alpo. Alpo is the name of our Tableau server. So Anton and I will kind of use this interchangeably throughout our presentation. It's called Alpo because Alpo is a dog food brand. Because we dog food at Tableau, we use our own product. It's a core cultural value. We want to understand the pains and pleasures of using Tableau that you guys experience as customers. So the most common question I get about starting Tableau Doctor is, where do the doctors come from? How do you get to be a doctor? How do you get trained? Well, how many of you folks have built a viz in Tableau? Keep your hand up if you've published it to server. Guess what? You're the doctors. Your company sent you here because you are your organization's Tableau expert. So there's nothing stopping you from taking this program back to your organization. And I know that this is like intimidating. Does that mean that if you go take this back to your organization, you start a doctor program, are you your organization's only doctor forever and ever? No way, not at all. If you have a strong community, you're going to have other people who want to participate in doctor. You're going to have patients who end up going for a couple months at a time, who get really good, get confident, and want to become doctors themselves. So doctor is really scalable, and you may be the first one, but you're definitely not going to be the last one. So I'm going to give you a little deep dive into how we use data to inform our Tableau Doctor program. It should come as no surprise that we track this data, and somebody actually asked me this question about how we track Tableau Doctor. I can't remember who it was, but this is the answer to your question. Here's our Tableau Doctor dashboard. We want to know the health of this program. How many people are we serving? Are we trending up? Are we trending down? Where are we serving people? So we have total visits over time. We have visits by department. We have distribution of visits. Who's visiting just once? Who's visiting more than 3 times? We have one person who's visited 25 times. And what % of a department has been. So these 2 bar charts on the left and on the right, they look pretty similar, but they're not. The one on the left is just raw visits by department. And the one on the right is a metric that we call departmental participation in doctor. So this is a ratio of total number of people in any given department who have been to doctor over the total number of people in that department. So that's kind of like our entire potential market for doctor within that department. So when we paired up this data with the department data, we knew anecdotally that certain teams visited us more often than other teams. But we were really shocked to see that customer solutions and development had such a low participation rate in Doctor. Customer solutions is not such a big deal for us because these folks are our product experts, they're in pre-sales, and it doesn't surprise us that they're not coming to Doctor to ask us about how to connect to data. But it did surprise us that our development organization, that's actually the largest organization within Tableau, had such a low participation rate. Actually, when I put this together, it was a 12% participation rate. So it has risen to 15. So we knew that there was a huge opportunity for outreach to our development organization. We wanted to get them using our product more. We wanted to make it fun working with the data, and we wanted to help them. So we started our own development doctor. These are development-specific doctors that happen alongside all the other doctors on Thursday. And it caters to this audience. It helps development out with their particular data sources, with their particular problems, bug tracking, that sort of thing. So we have, at Tableau, rather than being in one campus, we're spread out all over Seattle. And we discovered that our engineering offices are not in the main building where we have our regular Tableau doctor on Thursdays. And this was actually a 5-minute walk is preventing people from coming to get their questions answered. Maybe it's the rain, I don't know. But we started these development doctor programs in Vancouver, BC, Kirkland, Washington, and then in a dedicated building in Fremont. So we did this, we were super excited. I sent out my email on Thursday. I said, hey, development organization, doctors for you too. Nobody came. It was marketing. I'm an analyst, so I don't tend to think about how to market these things. And it seems like my all email was getting completely lost in their inbox. Developers, I don't know, it was going to their spam box. They were not paying attention. As soon as we gained access to a couple of distribution lists that are specifically for the development audience, that was when we got people coming. So super high-tech ways of advertising. Another great high-tech way is we made signs. We put signs in these buildings, these engineering buildings. So that's really what got more people to come. So we increased from 12% to 15%. It seems like very, very little. But this is what it really looks like in terms of raw numbers. We went from an average of 10 development doctor visits a month before we started this program to about 16 a month. So I'm not done. We have a long way to go. We're not there yet. But we wouldn't have known this if we hadn't paired up this data together. And now we have a goal. We would like development to be somewhere around, I don't know, 30%-ish. And we're definitely getting there. So I've told you a little bit about how to start your own Tableau doctor. I've told you about how we use data to inform our programs. Now I'm going to tell you our business case for Tableau doctor. This is above and beyond the ways that you could help people in your organization. We're going to explore 3 different scenarios. So for those of you who were here at TC in Las Vegas last year, Daniel Pink came and he spoke about the 3 things that really motivate people in their day-to-day work. He said these 3 things are autonomy, mastery, and purpose. And Tableau Doctor at Tableau is really how we enable our organization to have autonomy in their work, to have mastery with data and with Tableau, and to have a greater purpose. If you were to talk to anybody at Tableau who's involved in our Tableau Doctor program, they would say that the purpose is camaraderie and community. So as I go through these scenarios, some of the assumptions are not going to hold for your organization, but I want you to look past that, and I want you to think about ways that you could take this slide back to your organization and start your own doctor program. Okay, at our Tableau Doctor, in any given week, we have an average of 10 doctors who serve 20 patients. So each doctor has an average of 2 patients a week. And organizationally, it costs us 15 hours to help on the part of the doctors and 15 hours to be helped on the part of the patients. Now, it's probably a more common scenario where you have a specialist team, like a team of the data team, the analyst team, to help people get unstuck with their questions. So if it's the job of a single analyst to help that same number of people, It's going to take them the same amount of time organizationally to help those people, but it's going to take longer if you're a patient, and here's why. It's all well and good if you're person number 1 or number 2 on their list to be served, to get your question answered, but what happens if you're number 15 or you're number 20? You have to wait. There's a cost to that, and we peg that cost at an additional 10 hours a week. That works out to a half an hour wait per patient. Okay, so these are the 2 scenarios where you actually have another person whose job it is to help you. But you don't have to provide help. You don't have to provide training. There are plenty of places that you can find help. Our community is one of them. We have tons of resources to help you learn how to use data and to use Tableau. And this third scenario is going to outline that. Of course, it's going to cost you more organizationally because people are looking for answers on the internet and you don't have a person who's there to help you get the answer to your question. We think it's going to take 3 times as long, and it's going to cost the organization 45 hours a week to get that same amount of help. It also foists the entire burden of looking for help onto the patient. So these are our totals organizationally in terms of time. 30 hours for a doctor, 40 hours a week for a specialist, 45 if you have no program to help people out. Let's put this in terms of dollars. So using a labor cost of $50 an hour, it's a nice medium number between hourly employees and engineers who make more. Our first scenario is going to cost the organization $78K a year. So this is 30 hours a week times $50 an hour times 52 weeks. Our second scenario is going to cost the organization more, of course, because of the extra time spent waiting for a person to finish with the backlog of tickets. That one's going to cost us $104K. And our third scenario clocks in at $117K a year. There's a ton of dead weight loss associated with people furiously typing, looking for answers on their own. So those are the easily quantifiable costs, but there are other costs in play that are harder to put a number on. What's the cost to your organization of a mistake? At Tableau Doctor, when we get a really gnarly question, we shop it around to a second person and a third person and a fourth person because it's better to have more brains on a really, really tough problem. Sometimes it takes us to that fourth doctor to even get an answer, but we want to make sure that we have lots of different perspectives. We want to make sure we haven't forgotten something. And I'm not saying that Tableau Doctor is immune to mistakes. We all make mistakes, but there's so much value in having more than one brain on a really tough problem, and that's harder to come by in the second and the third scenario. That was the cost of mistakes. Let's talk about the cost of a user leaving because they feel unsupported professionally through their data journey. So if somebody doesn't have mastery over data or over Tableau, if you're making them responsible for analytics and you're not supporting them through their data journey, if they feel like they can't be autonomous in their work and you lose even a single person in the second or the third scenario, the math becomes a whole lot more compelling. We know that it costs money to enable users, but what does not enabling them cost your organization? Okay, let's think about the experience here. Forget money. What's it like if you're a person who needs help? Which of these is preferable? Not the third scenario, because you're completely on your own. Not the second scenario, because you have to take a ticket and get in line. But I want to let you know, as a doctor, as an analyst at Tableau, I also prefer the first scenario. And it's because I already have time built into my week to help people. So I can be more efficient in my non-doctoring time. Somebody comes to me on a Monday and they have a question, I don't have to drop what I'm doing. I can tell them, make an appointment with me on Thursday if it's not time sensitive. So doctor organizationally is really, it saves us time, it saves us money. From the standpoint of building a Tableau community, it's a no-brainer to choose doctor where you're building up your expertise within the organization. More people can help, and you're not housing all of your expertise within a single team or a single analyst. So it saves us time, it saves us money, and it helps us skill up together while getting one-on-one help to our users, while helping people feel supported. So we love Doctor, but that was a deep dive into Doctor. I'm going to pull us out of that deep dive just in time to tell us about our last fundamental of a Tableau community. Some content is important to some people in your Tableau server, and some content is important to absolutely everybody. You want your entire organization beginning their day with a certain dashboard. How do you tell which is which? So our last fundamental is helping people find content. Now, when your Tableau deployment gets to be of a certain size, you're going to be swimming in great content, great business questions, great dashboards. That's a good problem to have because it means the cycle of analysis is alive and well, and you're really enabling people with data and with Tableau. But nevertheless, it was a huge problem for Tableau. We were hearing from people who were saying that they were losing minutes in their day, searching for some dashboard that they had seen one time, and they didn't know exactly what it was called, and they didn't know how to search for it. We heard from people that they didn't have a single place to go to begin their day, a single landing page. So here's what we came up with. It's a complement to Tableau Server. This is my Alpo. I already told you what what Alpo is. This is our personalized portal to our Tableau server. So I log in here in the upper right. I have my recents here. I have my favorites. I can even create a new viz. I can, from this link, go to any of our curated data sources that the analytics team has made for the organization to empower them. I can look at the news that's coming directly from my internal community, which you guys saw on my first slide. It's truly awesome. It brings everything together in one single place. So we're helping people find what they need. How do people find what they need on Tableau Server? They use search. So the person who built my Alpo, it's Anton. He's going to come up and tell us how he built search for my Alpo and how you can put search into other places and help people find what they need.
Thank you, Aaron. That was a great intro. Yeah, I built my Alpo, our internal portal to our Tableau server, obviously with the help of my analytics team, or our analytics team. I don't own it. So Aaron talked about how my Alpo benefits our community, the community aspect of it. I wanted to take a moment and talk about the technological aspect of it, why we built my Alpo, and how it's benefited our technology. So when we first built my Alpo, we often got that question of why are you doing this, especially from our dev team. But we had to explain to them that we had users, both new users and veterans, that would come in day to day, and they would need to get to the same content possibly. They needed to access the same 5 vizzes every morning to see where their sales are, where the recruiting is at, what bugs have been fixed, and what bugs are on their table right now. But unfortunately, even though that's possible in Tableau Server, it took a few steps. So for us, we saw the necessity for our business needs that we needed to customize our Tableau Server to fit our users much better. So we put in MyAlpo, which allows users to see their personal content right up there on the first page. And they click, and it loads an embedded viz right on the portal. They don't even have to go into Alpo unless they need to search for something else or see some other content. So when building MyAlpo, we had to interact with tons of our dev team. We hit nearly every single API we had, and we stretched the product to extreme limits. And what we gained from this is we actually had a really close relationship with our dev team, and they gained great insight that they never had before. They had access to a user that they'd never had access to on that level. So they gained a lot of insights, and they've made a lot of changes to our product already. They've changed search. They've improved the way that, and they've added more features into our pipeline, such as the recent views and favorite views that are coming later. But those things were influenced by MyAlpo. And MyAlpo also acts as a breeding ground. So the recommendations engine that you saw earlier, that thing was tested out with MyAlpo in mind. So that it had a true user base before it went to customers. And with that work, our API team has also made improvements. They've added new calls so that search is better. They've improved calls so that it's easier for our customers, and they've improved documentation. And all of this is so that our customers have a better experience. So as a final goal after this project finished, we knew we had to take these lessons and pass them along to our customers, because we knew we already had customers building portals. We had other ones that were interested in doing the same thing. So I wrote a 3-piece blog post. You can find it if you search on the Tableau blog under my name, Anton, if you already forgot. Aaron? Anton, it's Anton. You can search for it. It's a 3-piece blog, and we explain how we built MyAlpo, why we did it, and how our customers can do the same thing. And in that blog, we talked about one key element of MyAlpo. As Aaron pointed out, search. We talked about how we built search. And unfortunately, I didn't get the opportunity to dive really, really deep into that. So I'd like to take the opportunity right now to do that. So let's look into building search. And before we start, I know this is an advanced session, and I wanted to make this advanced. So there's going to be code in here. Don't freak out. Maybe you don't understand it. That's fine. I'm going to go through it pretty quick, but it's there as a resource for you to use later on. When those slides are posted on the TC site, you'll be able to take it, and even if you don't understand it, you can go to somebody in your organization that does understand the code. Now, along with the slides, I'm also going to be providing customer-ready search code. It's going to be ready for you to basically plug and play where you need it, and you can put in the variables to connect to your own Tableau server. And also, if you can't wait, it's already up on our community site. Again, search for my name, Aaron. It's Anton. Don't get confused. You can find it on the community site. Search for portal search for Anton. You can get all the code there. It's already available. So let's get started. Why was search so difficult? So, like you, I have bad estimation skills when it comes to projects. Do a lot of home improvement projects, and I always look at it and I think that's going to take about a week or 2, maybe 3. End up taking an entire summer. Kind of same thing happened with this MyAlpo search. We thought it was going to be an easy problem. We've had customers that have done similar things. But unfortunately, since our customers have done it, we've made a few improvements. Since the version 9, we have this new Omni search bar. And what the Omni search bar is, it's the name for that search bar at the top of your Tableau server that performs the search as you type. And it searches the entire repository. It's a great new feature, but unfortunately, it's made it a lot more difficult for us to replicate it. So how that search actually works is it uses a web client API. It's an internal API that we use, and unfortunately, therein lies the problem. This API actually can't be accessed from external servers, unfortunately. So we didn't really want to throw away the search completely, and we didn't want to go away from using this API. And the reason for that is this API actually does something wonderful for us. When a user is signed in and uses this API to do some searches, it already filters down the results to what the user can see. It's because we didn't want our users to go into our Tableau server, perform a search, and get to content that they weren't supposed to see, or even view the title. I'm sure those needs fall for everybody else. So before we get into it, let me give you this big picture of what this is going to look like. Don't worry about all the junk. We're going to talk about it into 4 pieces. So before we actually perform a search, we first have to authenticate a user, right? User comes in, they give us their username and password. We take that, we do some stuff. I'll explain the stuff in a bit. And we get, at the end, 2 authentication tokens. We're going to need to save those for later. So say I come in and I start a search. I search for holidays. I search for holidays because actually on Alpo, we have a dashboard that shows us all the holidays that we get off from work in our different offices. So it's something I search for a lot. So say I want to see if we get President's Day off. Search for holidays. From that, we construct 5 API calls. Those 5 calls are get views, get workbooks, get projects, data sources, and users. 5 calls. You don't really have to do all 5 calls. You can do 1, 2, or 3. You can't really do 6, though. But to get a perspective of what these look like, before you start doing this project, I really recommend you open up Fiddler. If you don't have Fiddler, install Fiddler. Open up your Tableau server, perform a few searches, and see what it looks like. You'll get a perspective of what the requests look like, of what the responses look like, And we're going to want to copy those for our own search. So we take those 5 calls, right? And we throw them to a web data connector. This web data connector is going to do some processes. It's going to throw these searches onto our Tableau server. And from there, we get the results sent back to the client, where we post them up for the user to use and love and cherish and perform another search right away. So let's get started. Authentication. This was the easy bit, actually. This we could actually do external to our Tableau server. The reason for that is this API has a restriction strictly for post requests. And this login call only required GET requests. So we were fine there. So what we do is from our portal server, we perform 2 calls. Do a generate key call, which gives us a modulus and an exponent. And from that modulus and exponent, we take those and encrypt the username, we encrypt the password. If you know what a modulus and exponent is, please explain that to me after this talk, because I only learned how to just use it. I don't really understand it. And that's the honest truth there. So we take the encrypted password, we take the username, we take the key, and we throw it all into the second call, the login call. From there, we get the authentication tokens, which we'll take and store as cookies on our site. And this is what it all looks like. So this is, first we do the generate key call, this is the actual code. Then we get the modulus and exponent at the top. We encrypt the password at the bottom. Then we do the login call, and at the very end, that's the sweet spot. If everything goes well, which it usually does, we get those 2 authentication tokens. So we save those as cookies. So then what do? We need to actually make those 5 search calls. But unfortunately, those 5 calls are all post requests. And as I said earlier, those are restricted to only the internal server. So we had to look at options of how to fix that. So one option we had is we can make our portal internal. We can put the portal server on the same server as Tableau server. But our Tableau server is business critical, and we couldn't really take the resources away from it. So our server team said that's not possible. That's a no-go. Next thing we could do is we could open up cores. Now, opening up cores would allow APIs to be hit from external servers. Unfortunately, doing that really opens you up to some attacks. So we didn't want to take that security risk because we had some private information on our Tableau server. So security team said that's not possible too. So we did some searching. No, we did it on the web. So we did some searching, and luckily we found this blog post written about by our Tableau Zen master, Tamash. Now what Tamash said, he talked about this concept where you can take an iframe pointing to a web data connector that lives on a Tableau server and basically port some API calls from external to internal. It's basically magic, but what we did is this is how we took his method and applied it to our problem. So first thing we needed to do is create a web data connector. Check. We import that to our Tableau server where we perform this search. That web data connector has to listen for content coming in. Once it hears something, it has to make sure it's valid, right? We don't want any kind of malicious content, so it has to come from our portal server. It has to be a GET call. We don't want users removing things. We just want them getting stuff. We have to create the cookies from the authentication tokens that we pass along. And after that's all done, we take that API call, we pass it to the Tableau server, which is internal, right? Because we're on a web data connector. It returns the results back to us, and we spit it all back to the client side on the portal. That's how it's all done. And this magic sauce, this whole beautiful thing, isn't it beautiful? It's beautiful. It's all just 100 lines of code. I love it. And without this, we wouldn't be anywhere. This 100 lines of code is just one div that the iframe points to. It's just an event listener listening to things coming in. And the rest, it's just JavaScript. Authenticating things, making the calls, creating the cookies. So after that web data connector is created, that magic sauce, we still need our client side to actually do stuff, right? The web data connector doesn't know anything. It just sits there and listens. So what does the client side do? We have 2 parts of the client side. We have the PHP, we have JavaScript. PHP side, pretty simple. We just have an iframe pointing to the web data connector, as I said. Then we have to have a location for the results to live so the user has access to them. And the rest is all done on the JavaScript. So what the JavaScript does in our case is we actually have to wait for a user to start a search. In our case, we wait for a user to pause while they're typing, just like Tableau server does. But you can have a button, you can have an enter key or something like that. So once a search is initiated, we have to construct all 5 API calls using the search that the user wants to search for. We construct all 5 API calls, we throw in the URL, we throw in the authentication tokens, and what we have is 5 long strings. And we take those 5 strings and we throw them onto the iframe, which goes straight to the web data connector. Now, fortunately, after that, we have to wait for the response back. And the problem with that is the response back doesn't necessarily come back in the same order it went out in. And the problem with this, or the reason for this, is that we're using this middleman, the web data connector, so we don't get the results directly back. And some calls, like the user's call, happens a lot faster than other calls like get views. So this might not sound like a problem, but the responses actually look ridiculously similar, almost frustratingly so. They're very, very long JSON responses, and they all have very similar data structures, so it's frustrating to figure out which one came from where. So we scratched our heads and eventually came to a solution that I'll share with you here, just so you don't have to scratch your own head. So what we did is we had to do a process of elimination. We created this method. And what it does is it takes the response, and it looks through it, and the first thing it does is it says, well, does this data structure contain this piece, the results views? If it does, then it's a view. That's the only place where that exists. Send a view back and stop right there. If not, let's continue. Does it have that data? Does it have the data structure of data sources, which is contained in views? It's contained in data sources, but nowhere else. So if it does, it's a data source. Spit it back. We already know it's not a view. Stop right there. And we continue doing this for all 5 calls until we figured out which one it is. So pretty hard problem in reality, pretty simple solution. So once we've processed which request the response came from, we actually have to do some other things. We got to make sure it came from the right place. We have a lot of other API calls hitting our portal, so we want to make sure we don't treat them all like searches. So we got to make sure it comes from the web data connector. Other thing we have to do is we actually have to spit back the results. So what we wanted to do is we wanted to make our results at first look the exact same as what the user sees on Tableau server. And so for that, we have to strip out some things like the ID, the name, the view count, and we put it all into a link that we, with CSS styling, we present back to the user for them to use. So let's go back to the whole picture. This whole thing, that whole process takes less than a second. So the entire thing acts just the same as you see it on Tableau server, and the user doesn't have any worse of an experience. And that was very, very critical because we don't want the user using a very, very critical system like search and having a poorer experience. So this might have not made sense to you, but the code is there for you. The explanation is all there for you. You can take this code and go back to your organization. You can share it with a web developer, get some buy-in, and you can put search very quickly where you need it most. Maybe it's a portal, or maybe it's your internal homepage, or maybe you have better ideas than I do. So that was search. Let's step out of that, look back, in case you were asleep, on a too long didn't read. Success in building a successful Tableau community is a whole lot more than just setting up a Tableau server. It's not just going to sprout up organically. You're going to need tools and programs in place to make that happen, right? You need to have formalized definitions and knowledge so that everybody's speaking the same language and we all understand each other. You need to engage your users so that you get the knowledge from the top up and engage those users that might be struggling, that are not so technical. You need a place to get questions answered that lowers the barrier for those that might be struggling, and that spreads the knowledge from everybody across your organization. And lastly, once your community has become vibrant and has grown to a large size and you have tons of content, which is great, you need to help your users find that great content. And we suggest a portal, but maybe you have other ways of doing that, but that's important. Don't forget, you need to constantly be using your programs, your data to improve your programs, to figure out who is struggling, who can you be helping better, and whose voice are you not hearing. And don't forget, putting search where you need it most is game-changing. Your users might need it on their internal homepage, and they'd be able to be a lot more successful and a lot more efficient. So look at all these things that we've talked about, and think back about it. Think about what you're going to take next week to your organization, and what can you use to improve your community so that it's more successful, so that your deployment is more successful. Now, I'd like to say thank you. But before we take any questions, there's some related sessions that you can go to tomorrow. I'll put the slide back up in a second. And please do not forget to rate this talk. If you've enjoyed it, if you haven't enjoyed it, I want your honest criticism, because we want to make our improvements for next year's TC. And finally, thank you very much for coming and listening to our talk from myself and from Aaron. Are there any questions? Yes? Okay, boy Aaron, yeah.
So, is it possible, so in our setup, we have Tableau as one of several database tools,
Mm-hmm.
and I would want to be able to search from a single point across Tableau and the other database tools specifically, and then return only some information, so not access to the actual dashboard, but maybe the dashboard or that something has been built and
Yeah.
who that person is. Is it possible for a separate service to come into the Tableau server and perform the search or similar search?
Yeah. You can
Can you
put.
repeat the question?
Yes. Let me repeat the question. Is it possible to put search in so that another service can come in and perform this search and only give you filtered back results to some vetted data sources or workbooks, things like that? Is that correct? Yeah, you can do that. Within the search, within the API, if you actually look at what the request looks like, there's a lot of filters you can use. So you can use those filters to filter down your content. But if you're looking for specific data sources or workbooks, you'd have to do that manually after the results come back. You'd have to manually check them against like a list, maybe like a hash or something like that. But you'd be very easily able to allow a third-party system to perform these searches for you. Yeah. Any other questions? Yep.
Do you for your community engagement, do you do any internal user groups or
Internal user groups.
You want to repeat the question?
Yeah, the question was, do we have, for engagement programs, do we have any internal user groups? Yeah, we have at times. We've had, to build on the Alpo Doctor, we have had Alpo's Anatomy, which is one way that we have spread tribal knowledge among the power users in our company, the analysts who know the data definitions and the data models really well. We've had that. That's specifically for our power users and for our analysts. We've had show and tells. What's
Performance Academy?
Performance Academy, yes. So we have another program that we have called Performance Academy. It started off as a way to troubleshoot performance issues with dashboards, with data sources. Since then it's morphed because I think organizationally we all kind of know now why dashboards are slow, why data sources might be slow. But we use that as a way to, often if development has new features, we'll have them come in and showcase their new features to us as analysts. We use Alteryx. We use that as an Alteryx user group. We have all sorts of user groups like that, yeah.
Does that answer your question? Yeah, great. Any other questions? Yes.
For your community, as you were building it, did you have to, I guess, kind of how did you get started with it? Because you don't have, like, maybe that natural base, like, you have the externals, like, or probably something.
Right.
That's a great question.
So
Yeah.
we don't have that.
Mhm.
And building that energy seems like a lot of work and not sure what to put out there.
Right.
What are the right things to kind of put out there first?
Right. I mean, again, it doesn't have to be a website like that. It could be a shared drive on your LAN. As long as everybody knows where all of these things live and that these are the source of truth, that's kind of a shared foundation that you can start from. First things to put on our community.
Yeah.
Data sources, data source definitions, schemas, how to connect to them, what to do with them. That would be number one. I wasn't there on day one to help do that, but I imagine that was probably one of the first things that went up.
Yeah, from day one, what we did at Tableau is we knew data sources would be critical, having like vetted data sources for our community to use. So what we did is we scoured our databases to figure out which tables were being linked together what kind of queries being performed. And that's where we started with how we build our data sources. But now with the improvements with Tableau Server, you can see where your users are which data sources are being used the most, which fields are being used the most. And that's where I'd really point you to your first point of like, what should you show is the content that's being used the most.
Yeah. Yes.
The landing page,
Yes.
would you recommend using a Tableau worksheet as a landing page and embed links to FAQs
Mhm.
or the
Yeah.
instead of doing other way around where I'm doing a web portal? Because I'm beginning to launch
Right.
and I will not have the bandwidth to get dev resources to build a web page.
Right.
But I do want my users to go to the landing page.
That's a fantastic question. It's really, really good. So when we were building our
The
landing,
question was?
right, the question was, can you, instead of building your own portal and having devs to build it, could you use a dashboard to have links to vetted content and links elsewhere that your users would use? Yes, that's a perfectly acceptable way of doing it. We've had a lot of customers do it that way. When we were researching how to build our portal, we obviously looked into a lot of how our customers did it. And we kind of saw two sides of things. So the way we approached it is we have a lot of very technical users. So our portal is very, very technical. There's a part at the bottom you didn't see, which is like a discovery dashboard, and it's a viz showing users what content is relevant right now, what content they should be looking at. And it's presented in a way not just as a list, but as giving them the actual data of here's why you should trust me, why this data matters. We have a lot of power users, so our portal is meant for those power users to get them to the content they need the most fast. But on the flip side, we have the other extreme. We had a lot of customers who were building portals, not for the super technical people, but for the less technical people, the people that wanted just to get to the same 5 vizzes or get to the same data source every single day and have it there all in one place and easy. So they didn't have to mess around with Tableau Server, which in all honesty, Tableau Server is not meant for, the least technical of people. It might be intimidating to them. So they wanted to give them a way of making it less intimidating. We actually played around with that. One person, Matt Coles on my team, actually, and Aaron Stevens, they together during a hackathon created exactly what you're talking about, a dashboard that had
Dashboard of dashboards.
yeah,
is what we
dashboard of
called it.
dashboards that had content that, here's the most important views right now. Here's data sources that are vetted, and it was just a stagnant list. It had one great feature that Matt Coles presented into it, or added into it, was the ability to go in and, as a publisher, see your own content and how it's doing. See if it's extracting correctly. See if people are using it. See if it's stagnant. So those kind of things. So yes, totally. Take Tableau and create a dashboard, and it wouldn't take a whole lot longer than, I think Matt Coles and Aaron Stevens did it in 2 days, and they're pretty technical. So I'd say a week, 2 weeks would be, you could easily do that, and it's a great way of doing that.
Can we find samples for the community?
Give me your card. I'll look. I'm pretty sure there are samples, but give me your card and I'll point you to them. I would search for either Matt Coles or Aaron Stevens on our community to see if they've posted things. But if you give me your card, I can find that content and get it to you. Yeah, I believe so. It's kind of hard to tell what stuff is internal, what stuff is external sometimes. Any other questions?
One question.
Yep.
So a lot of what you discussed is related to, what you guys do internally.
Mhm.
You're more developers than maybe the typical, organization where we
Sure.
have a lot of consumers, and not necessarily developers. So in terms of people that are just consuming some of the stuff and not creating, how would you, what would you recommend in terms of engagement? How the doctor wouldn't necessarily want to say in my organization has done this.
So the question was, for more consumers of data, how could you get people engaging with the data, with fewer technical users? I mean, I think the Tableau Art Walk was a great way that we were able to do that. We're always looking for ways to engage our less technical users. That's the one that comes to mind. I want to hear other people's ideas about how to do these.
I'd like to tag along to that.
Yeah.
One additional thing that for consumers specifically that I've personally loved, I'm not the biggest creator at Tableau, believe me. There's people way more skilled than I am. is we have show and tell. Is that what we call it?
Oh, yeah.
The show and tell, where like on a Friday evening, people will come together. Usually beers are provided. And one person from one department, say marketing, will come up and show their main dashboard, the thing that like, that's their beauty, that's their bread and butter, and explain it, explain how they built it, explain what it means. And it's really fantastic because it brings people, not just from marketing, but it brings devs, it brings sales people, it brings operations people, IT. Everybody comes together and learns about a new dashboard, and you get this cross-department collaboration where people are like, oh, that's really brilliant. I could actually use that information in something I need. And that's really geared towards consumers to kind of evangelize things that are out there that are huge and important, but maybe not everybody from different departments might know about it.
Right. I mean,
Yeah.
you could reverse engineer a dashboard in a Tableau doc. You don't have to be answering questions if people don't have questions. You can use it as like a group training time where you go through Tableau's on-demand training videos. I mean, you could use it as a study session. There's a million ways that you could use it.
Okay. It looks like we're out of time, but if you have any other questions, please come up. We're free after this, so come and ask anything you need. Thank you very much for coming.